More than 1 million Americans went to sleep last night in a vehicle. Not a shelter, not a friend's couch. A car. Parked on a side street, a church lot, or behind a 24-hour store, engine off, windows covered, trying to make sure nobody noticed. And here is the thing that makes this different from what most people assume. Many of them have jobs. Some have kids in school. Others are retired after decades of work. They don't look like the image we have of homelessness. And that is exactly why this crisis keeps growing, because the people caught inside it look just like everyone else. Today, we're going to walk through exactly what's happening, who it's happening to, and why the systems that were supposed to stop this have failed so completely. Let's start with the number the federal government doesn't talk about much. Every year, the Department of Housing and Urban Development releases a homeless count, a single-night snapshot meant to represent the full scale of the problem. But here is what that count actually measures: people in shelters and people visibly sleeping on streets. It does not count the family in the minivan parked 2 blocks from the elementary school. It does not count the man sleeping in his truck outside the warehouse where he works the early shift. It does not count anyone who has decided, deliberately, to stay invisible. And that invisibility is not an accident. Families living in vehicles rotate locations every few nights to avoid being noticed. They choose quieter residential streets. They keep curtains across the windows. They leave before dawn. They do everything possible to look like they belong, because the alternative is a fine, a tow, or something worse. Researchers believe the true number of Americans sleeping in vehicles on any given night is dramatically higher than what official data shows. In California alone, vehicle dwellers make up close to 40% of the unsheltered population in certain areas. School districts across the country are reporting record numbers of students classified as homeless under federal law, and most of them are not in shelters. They are in cars with their parents. This is what the official count misses, and what it misses shapes every policy decision that follows. Now here is the part most people get wrong about this crisis. They assume it's about unemployment, about people who fell completely out of the economy. The data tells a very different story. One of the fastest growing groups living in vehicles is employed, full-time employed. People who wake up in a car, drive to work, put in 8 hours and drive back to a parking lot to sleep. Researchers have a name for them: the working homeless. And the reason they exist is not hard to understand, even if the implications are uncomfortable. Wage growth over the past decade has been modest. Rent prices in cities across the country have jumped 20 to 40% in just a few years. That gap between what workers earn and what landlords charge has become wide enough that having a full-time job no longer guarantees a place to live. Run the numbers yourself. Someone earning $15 an hour, 40 hours a week brings home roughly $31,000 a year before taxes. A one-bedroom apartment in most American cities now costs $1,500 to $2,000 per month. That's $18,000 to $24,000 a year in rent alone, before groceries, before gas, before anything goes wrong. And landlords don't just look at income, they require proof that a tenant earns 3 times the monthly rent. A worker bringing home $2,400 a month cannot qualify for an apartment listed at $900. Not because they're bad with money, because the math simply doesn't work. So they go to work. And they sleep in their vehicle. Some park near the job site. Some pay for a gym membership, not to work out but to shower before their shift. Some have been doing this for months, some much longer. This is what it looks like when wages and housing costs drift so far apart that having a job no longer means having a home. But here is the part of this story that is hardest to sit with. It involves children. More than 1 million students in the United States are classified as homeless under federal law in a single school year. That number has been climbing for years. A significant portion of those kids are not in shelters. They are sleeping in vehicles with their families. Think about what that morning actually looks like. A 9-year-old wakes up in the back seat of a sedan. No kitchen, no bathroom. Her mom drives to the nearest gas station so she can brush her teeth and wash her face before school. Then, she walks through those front doors trying to look like every other kid in the hallway. That night, she does her homework in the parking lot of a 24-hour store because that's where the Wi-Fi reaches. She can't sleep well because a car isn't built for sleeping. She's exhausted, she's anxious, and she is terrified that someone will find out because that is the thing she fears more than almost anything else. Research on childhood housing instability is clear. Chronic instability is tied to lower academic performance, long-term emotional health challenges, and life outcomes that can follow a child well into adulthood, long after the vehicle is gone. And yet these parents park near the school, specifically so their kids can keep attending. They're doing everything they can, holding things together from inside a parking lot. That determination is real, and it doesn't make the situation any less serious. If this is hitting close to home for you, literally or not, drop where you're from in the comments. I'm genuinely curious which cities people are watching this from. So how does a family actually end up there, and how quickly can it happen? Most people assume it's a slow slide, something you'd see coming, something you'd have time to prepare for. Most people are wrong. For a lot of families, the drop from a stable home to sleeping in a vehicle takes less than a month. Here's how it typically unfolds. A family of 4 in Phoenix, 2 working adults, 2 kids, gets a written notice that rent is going up $400 a month starting next lease term. They can't absorb it. They spend 3 weeks looking for something else in their price range. In their area, there's essentially nothing. They fall 1 month behind. The landlord files for eviction. Court costs get added to what they owe. They can't afford a lawyer. The process moves faster than they expected, because these processes almost always move faster than people expect. 6 weeks after that notice arrived, they're sleeping in their SUV in a church parking lot, figuring out how to get the kids to school Monday morning. This isn't an edge case. Eviction researchers at Princeton's Eviction Lab have documented millions of eviction filings across the country every single year, and the financial gap that triggers them is often surprisingly small. One missed payment, a few $100s in fees, a process that moves fast for people who can't afford representation. But here's what makes it worse. An eviction on your record doesn't just mean you lost your current home, it means most landlords won't rent to you again. Even a filing, not a completed eviction, just a filing, is enough for most tenant screening systems to automatically reject an application. The family that might have gotten back on their feet, given a little time, finds itself locked out of the rental market entirely. The car becomes the only option left. The speed is what makes it devastating. There's rarely time to form a plan. The window between financial trouble and sleeping in a vehicle is short, and the road back out is long. Now here's something that surprises most people when they hear it. Living in a vehicle is not cheaper than renting a home. For a lot of families, it actually costs more. Researchers call this the poverty penalty, the way that having fewer resources makes nearly everything more expensive. Vehicle living is one of the clearest examples of that in American life. Without a kitchen, families eat fast food, prepared meals, convenience store food. Feeding a family of 4 that way can easily run $60 to $100 a day, several times more than cooking at home would cost. Over a month, that gap alone can exceed what a modest apartment would have cost in some cities. Fuel becomes a survival cost. In summer heat or winter cold, the engine runs for hours just to keep the temperature inside livable. That can add $200 to $400 a month, on top of normal driving. Belongings that don't fit in the car go into a storage unit, $80 to $150 a month. Showers mean a gym membership or a truck stop fee. Laundry means a laundromat. None of this is optional. All of it costs money that could have gone toward a deposit. The Federal Reserve has found that a large portion of American households can't cover an unexpected $400 to $500 expense without borrowing. For families living in vehicles, every expense is expected, recurring, and unavoidable. And there's nothing left at the end of the month to build toward getting back inside. Being unhoused makes it more expensive to live. More expensive means harder to save. Harder to save means the trap closes a little tighter every month. So what actually built this trap? Because it didn't appear overnight. Over the past decade, rents have risen far faster than incomes in cities across the country. The National Low-Income Housing Coalition has documented something that deserves more attention than it usually gets. There is not a single state in America where a full-time minimum wage worker can afford